Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Roshi, Choa, and Herb, whoever else had anything to do with it, inviting me here to speak to you again or with you the second time. We did something like this last year. I can't remember exactly when, but it was mostly me kind of talking about my experiences when I was living in San Diego and my relationship with Sweetwater Zen. And I guess, again, San Diego and how I ended up back in Detroit, which is where I am right now, the Motor City. So hopefully nobody minds, I would like to have just a few moments of silence for the passing of Thich Nhat Hanh. If you're not interested in participating, that's fine, but I would just want to have a few moments of silence to remember the passing of this great teacher. Thank you for allowing that. Let's see. I don't think I'll be holding you very long, but there are a few things I'll just touch on. The first is perhaps a suggestion on how to listen to a Dharma talk. Our temple is near Wayne State University. And back in the good old days before the pandemic, occasionally we'd have students that were assigned to kind of pick a temple or religious event, attend, take some notes, and then of course turn in a report to their professor. So I would see people writing, of course, to create their reports or studies. I've also noticed occasionally that just members would bring in notebooks to jot down. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just wondering if there's another approach, an approach of kind of sitting with an receptive, still mind, an open heart, sort of in the way that the leaves of a tree can catch the breeze and the leaves seem to sing. The tree doesn't have to move left or right, back and forth to catch the wind. Just the wind comes through the trees, and whichever leaves are moved, and those that stay still, stay still. Perhaps another analogy could be the morning dew, in spring or summer. The dew falls, I guess, in the early morning, and some leaves, or I guess most of the leaves or blades of grass or plants, they catch drops of dew. Some do not. But whatever a leaf catches, it catches. Whatever it does not catch, it doesn't worry about. So I'm wondering if perhaps when we are listening to a talk, and maybe even this could apply to reading a Dharma book, we could kind of approach a teaching or a view in a similar fashion. I'm saying this because it it kind of points, in my opinion, to a way of looking at things that is not so desperate, a way that kind of reveals that we can have confidence in ourselves and our ability to drink deeply from teachings and from life itself. I think sometimes we can forget this and be so desperate for somebody to force feed us information. I can imagine that many of us have come to this practice out of desperation. I know I did. As I spoke about in my talk the last time, I was coming from a framework of addiction. And for me, having a solid spiritual practice was kind of fundamental for me staying on the right track. Hence the desperation. I did not want to go back where I came from. But at some point in one's practice, one begins to understand that the destination is already here. There are many paradoxes in this practice, I've come to understand. There seems to be a destination, a place to go to reach. And that is quite practical in the early days of our practice. But at some point, I'm thinking that the importance of being in the present moment is realized. I'd like to read one of our chants that we have at the temple. It's been so long. Also, I wanted to thank you all for allowing me to participate in your service. It's been a while since I've been in a group with the temple closing due to the pandemic. It was wonderful to participate with all of you. You have a wonderful Sangha, and I miss being there. This chant is called The Three Refuges. It goes, I go to Buddha, innate wisdom and compassion, as my refuge. I go to Dharma, teachings manifesting everywhere, as my refuge. I go to Sangha, the community of all beings, as my refuge. I had to read that in case I forgot a word or two. I didn't want to mess it up. So, at first a person, well, perhaps I should speak for myself. I kind of focus on, I go to Buddha for my refuge. I go to Dharma for my refuge. I go to the Sangha as my refuge. But the words that follow, the three, Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, is innate wisdom and compassion as my refuge, teachings manifesting everywhere as my refuge, the community of all beings as my refuge. And in my mind, what this kind of points to is that the goal of becoming a Buddha is not necessarily our aim. Our aim is to realize that this wisdom and compassion that we are reaching for in earnest is already here. We are this now. I'm also thinking that Dharma, meaning teachings, is something we think we can collect over the days, weeks, months, and years, and then at some point get some kind of a hat, and we will understand it all. And I'm not necessarily sure that means that as well. I'm thinking that our Buddha nature when we cultivate it, practice cultivating, I should say. And when I speak a lot about cultivating, I'm talking about the practice of zazen, cultivating zazen on a regular basis. When we cultivate this awakened mind, we are awakened, or we're more susceptible to be awake to the teachings that manifest themselves in our everyday life. This is important. Number one, Buddha nature is already here. Number two, we don't have to wait to graduate. Our life, our everyday life as we live it each and every day, is the Dharma unfolding for us. I go to the Sangha, the community of all beings, as my refuge. Now, for me, I could think of that as the great teachers, as Thich Nhat Hanh, the one who just passed, the Buddha, various men and women as monks, nuns, ordained teachers throughout the centuries, perhaps living today as the Sangha. But for me, it can also mean our ability to connect on a deeper level with our fellow human beings. Of course, our fellow practitioners of this way of ours, the middle way, but also kind of pointing to the importance of connection itself. I work as a therapist, seeing clients, individual clients, and after a few years of practicing, I'm beginning to understand the importance of being fully present for somebody, for ourselves to be nurtured by our daily lives, and for the sense of connection that we have with others so that we can support them. We can make a genuine connection. In this practice of ours, we also talk about liberation. And I have to ask myself, what does that mean? Liberation. Liberation from what? And many of us here have everything that we want or wish to buy. Liberation from what? I remember as a boy, we were playing in the backyard. I think a few kids of ours in the neighborhood. And somehow we got our hands on this old carpet. And we're kicking it around and rolling it. And I think part of the game was for me to get in it and get rolled up in it, I guess just for laughs. Oddly enough, when I found that myself trapped in the carpet, I began to panic. Uh-oh, this isn't fun anymore. I think shortly after that, I kind of forgot that initial shock. But I'm wondering if it isn't also related to sometimes feeling trapped in our lives, me especially, trapped by addiction, trapped by one way of looking at things, trapped by feeling not good enough, trapped by judging others, trapped by feeling hopeless. When I'm working with my clients, I find that some seem to be trapped in this loop where they can't let loose of this way of looking at things, of looking at the world or perceiving themselves. And I'm thinking that this practice of ours, when followed through with authenticity, humbleness, joy, humor, letting it unfold as it unfolds without expectation, there's something marvelous to that. That we can cultivate within ourselves a different sort of relationship to our thoughts and our feelings and our behavior. That we don't have to live our lives on the surface of things, as so many people choose to do, as I chose to do once upon a time, and perhaps will again now and then. That's why I must be watchful, attentive. But how does one cultivate being attentive? As best as I know or have seen thus far, this way of ours, the middle way, the practice of Zazen is the way, the gateway. We practice for ourselves to achieve liberation. And then we begin to see that we practice for the good of all beings. We take care of our lives, not just for ourselves, but with the understanding that when we do take care of our lives, when we do cultivate balance, when we do cultivate a deeper insight into this very life, we take care of the entire world as best as we can. And so I guess I've been told that I have the same message over and over and over again. It doesn't vary too much. And that is to encourage you to maintain your practice for yourself and the good of all beings. Remembering that your practice may have ripples reaching farther than you can possibly even imagine. Some say this is sort of a stagnant practice, just sitting still, watching the breath, feeling the body, watching the mind. I'm convinced that this is not so. And for you to be convinced, you must practice and find out for yourself. We have a container. We meet at a certain time, certain place, the TV's off, everybody puts their phones away. There's a container, a shape to our practice. There's different ways to practice according to different cultures, but it's basically the same, at least as far as sitting is concerned for me, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. So it seems like we're putting our lives in this container, but I don't want anybody to misunderstand that this container is not to make us conform. This container is meant to allow us to be who we are, our authentic selves. It may seem like we're fitting ourselves into a tight box, but at some point, if we are diligent, we begin to understand and taste freedom. A freedom that is not down the road, but freedom that is immediate. And when you discover this for yourself, no one can take it from you. And so I encourage you once again to continue your practice. You have such a wonderful Sangha. Please continue to take refuge in the Buddha, innate wisdom and compassion as your refuge, the Dharma teachings manifesting everywhere as your refuge, and the Sangha, the community of all beings.